How to use Whitman's manuscripts. Walt Whitman, one of America's most influential and revolutionary poets, left behind a lot of manuscripts. Manuscripts are handwritten documents, and their pen scratches and crossouts can reveal secrets. By comparing Whitman's original manuscripts to his printed editions of Leaves of Grass, I'll demonstrate how you can use manuscripts to interpret his poems more successfully. To see the manuscripts, we'll use the Walt Whitman Digital Archive, which can be found at www.whitmanarchive.org. Whitman's physical manuscripts are in museums and libraries across the country, but they are often too delicate to handle or even look at, and most people aren't even allowed to look at them. But on the Whitman Archive, everyone has free access to Whitman's manuscripts, notebooks, scribal documents, and letters and correspondence. You can study thousands of his manuscripts without ever leaving the comfort of your own home. Let's click on In Whitman's Hand and Poetry Manuscripts. This page shows us that manuscripts are displayed in the archive in different ways. For instance, the highlighted poem titles are actually links to transcribed versions of manuscripts. Let's click on the poem America. Transcribed means the words have been typed out with all additions, misspellings, and revisions clearly recorded. A transcribed version of a manuscript allows you to read the words easily, without having to guess what Whitman wrote or revised. By clicking the View Leaf 1 tab of the poem America, you can see why a transcription is helpful. Whitman's handwriting can be especially tricky to decipher, and many manuscript pages are worn out or faded, occasionally making the text almost illegible. If you prefer to view a handwritten page without the aid of a transcription, you can just go back to the Poetry Manuscripts page. Now, let's click on the Integrated Guide to Walt Whitman's Poetry Manuscripts link. This finding guide shows all of the archive's many poetry manuscripts. Scroll down the page, and you can find hundreds of manuscript page images highlighted in blue. For instance, these are the page images of Whitman's handwritten table of contents to the 1881 to 1882 edition of Leaves of Grass, and these are the page images for portions of the printer's copy of the 1881 to 1882 edition of Leaves of Grass. You can see Whitman's handwritten instructions to the printer as well as his corrections. If you click on any highlighted number, the manuscript page will open. On the left is page 1 of Whitman's handwritten table of contents, and on the right is page 28 of the printer's copy of the 1881 to 1882 edition of Leaves of Grass. You can see from the page on the right-hand side how meticulously Whitman revised his work. By returning to the finding guide and scrolling further down, you can also find images of the Blue Book, Whitman's personal copy of the 1860 edition of Leaves of Grass, which shows his psyche and state of mind while reading his own poems. For instance, by clicking on page 4, you can see that Whitman seems to have counted the words in the whole Bible, the New Testament, Dante's Inferno, and Milton's Paradise Lost in order to compare those word counts to the number of words in Leaves of Grass. Let's return again to the finding guide to explore a few more examples. You can locate individual poems by scrolling through the finding guide or by using the find function of your web browser or iPad. You'll see that some manuscripts are real doozies. For instance, let's select the first page of There Was a Child Went Forth. Wow! Transcribing a poem that looks like this is both fun and intellectually rewarding. Uncovering the deletions, revisions, additions, and original text of a manuscript on your own will give you new ideas about poems that have been read a million times. Let's return to the finding guide one more time to see how manuscripts can help you read a poem. Let's select the poem Facing West from California Shores for this example, and let's select the first page image. With this example, you'll see how manuscript analysis allows you to discover revisions made prior to publication, revisions we, as readers, would not know about if it weren't for the manuscript Whitman left behind. Immediately, you can see that even the title of this manuscript page, Hindustan from the Western Sea, is completely different from the title of the published version of the poem. With title changes like that happening, how can you find a particular manuscript on the Whitman archive? If you search for the title, you see that this poem first had the title Facing West from California's Shores in the 1867 edition of Leaves of Grass. But how can we be sure that the poem didn't appear in earlier editions under a different title? To answer that question, let's return to the Poetry Manuscripts Finding Guide and let's scroll down to the page images of Facing West from California's Shores. Under the two page images highlighted in blue, you can find a small paragraph that provides more information about the manuscript. These brief two sentences tell you that this poem was revised to form main section 10 of Enfants d'Adam in 1860, and in 1867 was given two new opening lines and retitled Facing West from California's Shores. Each manuscript entry in the Finding Guide has similar publication information listed under the page images. The easiest way to gather specific information about a manuscript page is to refer to the publication information provided in the manuscript entry. Now you know that Facing West from California's Shores was printed in the 1860 edition of Leaves of Grass, but it was then simply titled 10 in the Enfants d'Adam cluster. But what is the significance of the title change and other changes? To find out, we need to compare the manuscript to the published versions of the poem, and now that we know the titles, we can do so. So, let's return to the homepage of the Whitman Archive, and let's click on Published Works, Books by Whitman, and U.S. editions of Leaves of Grass. This page gives you access to all editions of Leaves of Grass. Because we already know that Facing West from California's Shores had a different title in the 1860 edition, let's click on the complete e-text of the 1860 edition to find it. We already know that the poem was titled 10 in the 1860 Enfants d'Adam cluster. If you scroll down to section 10 of Enfants d'Adam, which you can locate using the Find function of your web browser or iPad, you can also click on the View Page option directly above the poem. This allows you to view the printed poem as it originally appeared to readers in 1860. Now we can repeat the process and find the 1867 version by searching for the complete e-text. From here, you can locate Facing West from California's Shores, and by clicking on the View Page option directly above the poem, you can see it as it was originally printed in 1867. We now have access to the manuscript version, the 1860 version, and the 1867 version, and we can begin our analysis in earnest. Whitman first titles his manuscript Hindustan from the Western Sea, which reaches beyond American shores to Indian culture and geography. Whitman here seems to construct a persona and a voice that can speak for foreign populations. However, when Whitman publishes this poem, he titles it simply 10 in the 1860 edition of Leaves of Grass, erasing the Indian connection. In 1867, the title Facing West from California's Shores negates the original global inclusivity of Hindustan from the Western Sea even further, for now Whitman is focused solely on America, more specifically California. Notice what we just did with a simple reading of only the title by comparing manuscripts and published versions. We could argue, based on the different titles alone, that Whitman moves from inclusivity to exclusivity in this poem, from a celebration of Eastern cultures to an apparent concern only for the view from Western shores. But it isn't just the titles. The body of the poem reveals a number of additional revisions that point to Whitman's uneasiness with and gradual abandonment of Indian culture in the poem. In the manuscript, Whitman includes the names of the Indian deities Brahma, Manu, and Rama. In both published editions, however, Whitman simply refers to the god, the sage, and the hero. In the manuscript, the smudge that leads down from the K/C of Kashmir is indicative of Whitman's hesitation and uncertainty, perhaps not only about spelling. We see then that while Whitman attempts initially to construct an Indian poetic persona, he rejects it before his poem ever reaches publication. While we might legitimately see these changes as evidence of Whitman's attempts to make his poem as universalizing as possible, they might also reveal him to be apprehensive about migration and Western expansion past the Pacific. Whitman's fear can most obviously be seen in the closing lines of his poem. In the manuscript, Whitman's persona concludes the poem by describing himself as a man who is joyous after long travel, growth, and sleep. The speaker of the manuscript is content with his ventures and claims to have been made better by experience and expedition. In the published editions, however, the image of the contented traveler is diluted by the lines, "But where is what I started for so long ago? and why is it yet unfound? Gone are the cultural and geographic specifics originally found in Hindustan from the Western Sea, and gone too is the happiness and satisfaction of the original ending of the manuscript. The persona in the published editions is left questioning his seemingly fruitless expeditions, and his original joyous feeling of maturity and growth after long travel is qualified with hesitation and disillusionment. This analysis of the changes made between manuscript and published editions is, of course, only one possible reading of the text. The important thing to remember here is that this reading is only possible because we have access to Whitman's original manuscript. And this is why the Whitman Archive is such a valuable tool. Located at www.whitmanarchive.org, it boasts a collection of hundreds upon hundreds of manuscripts, letters, journals, and notebooks, all waiting to be investigated, analyzed, and discovered by you. All of the photos of Whitman, page images of Leaves of Grass, sections of text of Leaves of Grass, photos of the various covers of different editions of Leaves of Grass, and all other materials relating to Walt Whitman that were used in the making of this video were taken from and can be found on the Walt Whitman Archive, located again at www.whitmanarchive.org. Thanks to Marin Smith and Justin Swanson for their contributions to the poetic analysis.